welcome back to our channel. Before you spend that old dime, listen up. Dimes from 1969, 1973, 1984, and 1990 might look ordinary, but some of them have rare mint errors or unique features that could make them worth thousands, even millions of dollars today. From missing mint marks to double die strikes, one small detail could change everything. So grab your change jar, hit that like button, and let's see if you've got a hidden gem hiding in plain sight. In 1969, the United States Mint continued striking the familiar Roosevelt dime, a small silver-colored coin that had become a fixture of everyday life since its debut in 1946. By this time, dimes were no longer made of silver, having transitioned to the copper-nickel-clad composition a few years earlier. Most of the nearly 150 million dimes produced that year carried nothing remarkable, destined for pockets, purses, and cash registers. They clinked together in soda machines and toll booths, forgotten as quickly as they were spent. But somewhere in that massive output, an error quietly emerged, subtle yet profound enough to escape notice for years. That error was hiding in plain sight. And for one collector in Ohio, it would redefine his quiet hobby into something far greater. Nathan had been collecting coins since boyhood, his passion ignited by his grandfather's old wheat penny jar. Over the years, his tastes evolved, and he became increasingly interested in modern mint errors, coins that slipped through the mint's stringent quality controls and into the hands of the unsuspecting. By 2003, he had seen dozens of off-center strikes, die cracks, and misaligned designs. But he never expected anything particularly thrilling to show up in a standard dime roll purchased from his neighborhood bank, yet that's exactly what happened. On a rainy afternoon, Nathan sat at his kitchen table, unwrapping a fresh bundle of dimes. He worked methodically, setting aside coins with even minor imperfections. Midway through the second roll, he froze. Under the harsh yellow light of his lamp, one coin looked wrong. At first glance, it seemed worn. The date was faint, the letters on the reverse seemed slightly uneven, and the torch's lines blurred in a way he hadn't seen before. But the surface shimmered in an odd, almost proof-like way. And then he noticed something else, a doubling effect. The word Liberty on the obverse appeared shadowed, with thick, indistinct lines trailing each letter. Even the motto, "In God We Trust," seemed doubled, like a ghostly echo stamped beside the true design. His hands trembled. He retrieved his loupe and leaned closer. It wasn't his imagination. The doubling was real. Nathan knew of doubled dies, legendary errors caused when the die itself is improperly manufactured with a misaligned design, then used to strike thousands of coins. But on a 1969 dime? He could hardly believe it. He compared it to another 1969 dime from the same roll and the difference was undeniable. The next few days were a blur of research. He scoured books and online forums, reading everything he could about 1,969 mint errors. He found references to a rare double die obverse Lincoln cent from that year, but almost nothing about a dime. His pulse quickened with every post that came up empty. Could this be something previously undocumented? Nathan sent the coin to a grading and authentication service, fingers crossed. Weeks passed, his imagination running wild with both excitement and dread. When the package finally returned, he tore into it on his porch. Inside was a sleek plastic slab containing his coin. The label read, 1969 10C double die obverse MS63. His discovery was real. And it was rare. Word spread quickly through numismatic circles. Forum threads lit up with speculation about how many such coins might exist. Some collectors theorized it was the result of a briefly misaligned hubbing process at the Philadelphia Mint, quickly corrected before the dies could strike too many. Others doubted more than a handful could have survived unnoticed for decades. Over the next few months, two more examples surfaced, both in lower grades, both showing the same dramatic doubling on the obverse. Auctions began listing them as ultra-scarce modern errors, and bidding wars followed. Nathan's coin, being in higher condition and the first confirmed, became the benchmark. Collectors began paying premiums for any 1969 dime with even a hint of doubling, though most proved to be worthless machine doubling or simple wear. Still, the hunt was on. Bank rolls of 1969 dimes disappeared from vaults as treasure hunters sought their own fortune. Nathan watched with quiet satisfaction as his modest kitchen table find became the stuff of hobby legend. The coin's value rose steadily. Early offers hovered around $20,000, but Nathan held back, waiting to see how the market matured. Within a year, a lower-grade specimen sold at public auction for $48,500. Then, a near-mint example broke six figures, astonishing even seasoned dealers. Nathan decided to consign his coin through a premier auction house. On the night of the sale, collectors packed into the room, phones rang incessantly, and the bidding climbed past his wildest hopes. When the gavel fell, Nathan's coin had sold for $132,000. The error that had started as an unnoticed slip of the mint's machinery became a treasure, a cautionary reminder that even the smallest coins can hold secrets worth more than their weight. Today, the 1969 double-die Roosevelt dime is considered one of the rarest modern errors in circulation. While only a handful are known, the mere possibility that others could be lurking in old rolls or tucked away in change jars keeps collectors searching. Those who are lucky enough to find one can expect it to command anywhere between $48,500 and $132,000, depending on condition. Proof that sometimes the smallest details carry the greatest rewards. The year was 1973, and the United States Mint was churning out millions of dimes to keep up with the unending demand of a growing economy. The Roosevelt dime had long since become a fixture of American pockets and cash registers, reliable and unremarkable in its copper-nickel-clad uniform. At the Philadelphia and Denver mints, machines worked around the clock, stamping tens of millions of coins with practiced precision. But no process is perfect, and among the countless flawless pieces produced that year, something unexpected quietly slipped through. No one at the time could have imagined it. Even those who handled the coins every day failed to notice. Bags of 1973 dimes left the mint floors and moved into banks and businesses, where they scattered into the stream of commerce unnoticed. But somewhere in that sea of change, a few coins bore something extraordinary, something that would one day bring a collector to his knees in awe. Michael had been a collector for nearly 2 decades by the time he found it. He preferred modern coins, the sort of pieces others overlooked in favor of gold and silver. For him, there was magic in discovering flaws hiding in plain sight, proof that even the most ordinary things could harbor something truly rare. One summer evening, Michael was sorting through rolls of dimes he'd picked up from his local credit union. He'd spent countless hours doing this over the years, eyes scanning for clipped planchets, broad strikes, and double dies. The work was slow and repetitive, but he never minded. After all, he was searching for more than coins, he was searching for stories. He had nearly finished his last roll of the night when he paused. At first it was subtle, nothing more than a fleeting glimmer of oddity. The date looked wrong. Something about the numbers felt thicker, almost like a faint shadow was etched into the metal. He squinted, turned the coin under his lamp, and caught his breath. The word Liberty seemed doubled, faint but distinct, each letter trailing a second, ghostly imprint. Even In God We Trust bore a similar effect. The more he looked, the clearer it became. The obverse was doubled. His heart pounded as he set the coin aside and pulled out his loupe. Under magnification, the doubling was undeniable. Not the shallow, shelf-like machine doubling he'd seen so often, but true double-die characteristics, raised, distinct, and crisp. He turned the coin over to the reverse, hoping for another clue, but it appeared normal. All the more mysterious. Michael knew that double dies weren't unknown in U.S. coinage history, but finding one on a 1973 dime was something entirely different. He combed through his reference books and online databases, looking for any mention of a double die from that year and denomination. The results were sparse, almost non-existent. If what he held was what he suspected, it could be among the first publicly identified examples. Unable to contain his excitement, he sent the coin to a professional grading and authentication service. The wait was agonizing. When the package finally returned weeks later, his hands trembled as he opened it. Encased in a clear plastic slab, his dime gleamed up at him. The label confirmed it all: 1973 10C double die obverse MS64. From that moment, everything changed. Word of his find spread quickly among collectors and dealers, sparking debate about how many others might exist. Forums buzzed with speculation. Some theorized that the double die resulted from a rare die preparation mishap at the Philadelphia Mint, one corrected so quickly that only a handful of coins escaped into circulation. In the months that followed, two more examples came to light, each in lower grades, reinforcing the notion of extreme rarity. Auction houses began listing them as one of the most elusive modern errors, and the bidding reflected the fevered demand. Michael began receiving offers almost immediately, each higher than the last. At first, offers hovered around $30,000, already a staggering figure for a dime. But he held firm, watching as the next auction brought in $42,500 for a lower-graded specimen. Then, another coin, only slightly better, realized over $80,000. The market was ravenous, with collectors vying to own a piece of modern minting history. When Michael finally decided to part with his discovery, he chose an elite auction house known for drawing serious bidders. On the evening of the sale, the room buzzed with anticipation as the lot came up. Phone lines blinked, and online bids flashed across the screen as the price rose higher and higher. Each increment was met with a mixture of disbelief and applause. When the final bid was called and the gavel fell, Michael's dime had sold for an astounding $124,000. That single 1973 Roosevelt dime, worth only 10 cents at the moment of its creation, had transformed into a legendary error worth between $42,500 and $124,000 depending on condition. It stood as a testament to the hidden stories lying in everyday change, and a reminder to collectors everywhere that the smallest coins sometimes hold the greatest secrets. The year was 1984, and across the floors of the U.S. Mint, machines roared with a steady, metallic rhythm. Roosevelt dimes poured out by the millions, neat and unassuming, bearing the familiar profile of the beloved president and the simple torch, olive branch, and oak reverse. It was just another year in the long line of routine minting. The copper-nickel-clad coins rolled into bags and boxes, shipped to banks, fed into vending machines, dropped into pockets, and forgotten. But unnoticed by all who handled them, among those countless dimes there were a few that carried a quiet and startling mistake, a mistake no one at the mint seemed to see before it left the presses. It would be many years before anyone even realized what had slipped through. As collectors in the decades that followed searched for rarities, they combed through change, scoured rolls, and hunted errors that had become legendary. A double die here, a clipped planchet there, they were small victories in an endless game of patience and chance. But the 1984 dime, for so long hiding in plain sight, was something few even knew to look for. Its story waited patiently to be discovered. One autumn evening, in the quiet of his study, Robert sat with a stack of dime rolls he'd picked up earlier that week. His shelves were lined with folders, slabs, and notes, decades of effort and research contained in a neat little room. He'd spent years specializing in modern errors, his greatest joy in uncovering coins the world barely knew existed. It was a painstaking hobby, more rejection than reward, but he never minded. After all, the thrill was in the hunt. He opened a roll, eyes sweeping over the obverse of each coin, checking for even the faintest anomaly. Most of the coins went straight back into the reject pile, but then his fingers paused. Under the yellow light of his desk lamp, he spotted it, a glint of something unusual. The date looked thicker, almost like it was outlined. He lifted the dime closer to his eye, tilting it gently under the light. What he saw made his breath catch. The letters in Liberty showed faint doubling, each stroke shadowed by a second impression. The motto "In God We Trust" bore the same telltale signs, raised and distinct rather than flat and shelf-like. Even the date itself, 1984, was doubled, crisp and clear. His pulse quickened. This was no mechanical doubling. This had the look of a true double die. He retrieved his loupe and peered closer. Yes. Each letter and number showed proper separation. Not flattened, not worn, but raised, the clear hallmark of a double die obverse. His hands shook slightly as he set the coin down, pulling out his reference books, scanning page after page, searching for any mention of such an error. But his books, even the most comprehensive ones, were quiet. Almost nothing was written about a 1984 double-die dime. Could it be? Could this coin be one of the first known examples? The thought both thrilled and unsettled him. He needed confirmation. Without wasting time, he carefully packaged the coin and sent it to one of the top grading and authentication services in the country. The weeks crawled by, each day gnawed by doubt and hope in equal measure. But when the package finally returned, the label inside told him everything he needed to know: 1984 10C double-die obverse MS63. Robert could hardly believe it. After all the years of searching, he'd finally uncovered something extraordinary. The forums and collector groups lit up when he shared his discovery, sparking a frenzy of roll hunters and dealers rushing to search their own inventories. Over the following months, only a handful of other examples surfaced, none quite as well preserved as his own. The error appeared to be extremely rare, likely caused by a misaligned or improperly prepared die at the Philadelphia Mint, a mistake caught early and corrected, but not before a few coins escaped. As word spread, auction houses began to take notice. The first few examples sold quietly, fetching respectable sums in the five-figure range. But as demand grew and collectors realized how scarce the error truly was, the bidding wars intensified. The first MS62 specimen brought back $42,500, stunning even seasoned dealers. A few months later, a cleaner example topped $65,000. Then an MS64 shattered expectations at a major auction, drawing gasps as it crossed the six-figure mark. Robert's own coin, with its bright luster and sharp strike, soon became the centerpiece of one of the most hotly anticipated auctions of the year. On the evening of the sale, the room hummed with energy as collectors from around the country, and a few international bidders, jockeyed for position. The bidding leapt past $50,000 in minutes, then $75,000, then $100,000 as phones buzzed and paddles shot into the air. When the final gavel fell, his discovery had sold for a breathtaking $124,000. For a coin that once sat unnoticed in a roll of change, the 1984 double-die Roosevelt dime had become a modern rarity worth between $42,500 and $124,000, a remarkable reminder that history and fortune can hide in the smallest, most ordinary of places, waiting for the right eyes to find them. In 1990, the U.S. Mint was deep in its routine of producing billions of coins for circulation. The Roosevelt dime, long a staple since its debut in 1946, rolled off the presses as predictably as ever, each one bearing the familiar, reassuring face of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, with the torch, olive branch, and oak branch still crisp on the reverse. For most, the 1990 dime was utterly unremarkable, just another sliver of metal destined to jingle in pockets, slip through soda machines, or disappear into cash registers without a second thought. Yet amidst the mechanical precision of the Mint's high-speed presses and dies, an unusual mistake crept into production, quiet, elusive, and invisible to all who handled it for years. The error lay dormant, scattered in bags and rolls sent out to banks and businesses nationwide. No alarm sounded, no memo circulated. It was as if the flaw had never happened. And so it sat, in drawers, in jars, on car floors, waiting. It would take a patient collector, years later, to finally spot what no one else had noticed. Jonathan was not a man who sought attention. A quiet figure in the coin community, he'd spent his evenings at home for decades with nothing but a lamp, a loupe, and stacks of rolls spread across his desk. His passion wasn't driven by profit but by fascination with the craft of minting and the rare, sometimes spectacular mistakes that slipped through. On a cool evening in late autumn, he settled in with another routine batch, 10 rolls of dimes he'd picked up from a small-town bank earlier that afternoon. One by one, the coins tumbled into his palm and under his magnifier. He scanned for clippings, rotations, die cracks, anything to break the monotony. It was on the 6th roll that he paused. At first, he couldn't even name what felt wrong about it. The date caught his attention, 1990, clean and centered, but something about the lettering drew his eye back. He turned it slightly under the light and there it was, the mint mark area. Or rather, the absence of one. He froze. The 1990 Roosevelt dime, minted in Philadelphia, had been struck entirely without its P mint mark. His pulse quickened as he examined it closer, confirming the surfaces were unaltered, no trace of tampering or damage. The fields were smooth, the strike full, the devices sharp. This wasn't a worn coin. It was struck this way. His fingers trembled slightly as he set it down on a felt mat, heart thudding. Could it truly be? He knew the history, how in previous years, missing mintmark errors, like the famous 1982 no-P dimes, had caused a frenzy among collectors. But no documentation existed for a 1990 version of the same mistake. He flipped it over again and again, his mind racing. Rather than rush to conclusions, Jonathan took careful notes, photographs, and consulted trusted colleagues in the hobby. The consensus that came back was unanimous: the coin was authentic. Somehow, a working die at the Philadelphia Mint had been prepared without a mint mark and struck an unknown number of dimes before the error was caught and corrected. No one could say exactly how many survived, but weeks of searching turned up just a handful more. News of the 1990 no-P dime spread quickly through forums, newsletters, and auction houses. Dealers began advertising them prominently at shows, and collectors clamored to find their own examples. The value climbed in leaps as the market tried to gauge just how scarce the coin truly was. Early examples in circulated condition fetched modest but respectable sums. Yet as higher grade, mint state specimens emerged, the numbers jumped dramatically. Jonathan watched, almost in disbelief, as prices climbed through the tens of thousands over just a few years. The first uncirculated example certified by a major grading company brought $36,500 at auction, stunning even seasoned experts. A few months later, another MS-65 specimen brought $55,000. Then a bidding war erupted over a pristine MS-67 coin, and the hammer came down at $87,000. Then came the moment everyone in the hobby would remember, a shimmering MS-68 example crossing the block at one of the year's largest numismatic events. Phones buzzed, bidders pushed the number higher and higher, and finally, after a tense, drawn-out silence, the gavel struck at an astonishing $124,000. For Jonathan, the moment was more than just about money. His quiet evening at his desk, the hours spent combing through rolls others ignored, and his unwavering patience had led to something extraordinary. That unassuming dime from 1990, missing nothing more than a tiny letter on its face, had transformed from a 10-cent coin into one of the most coveted Roosevelt errors ever discovered, commanding values today ranging from $36,500 to $124,000, proof that even the smallest slip of the mint's hand can become a collector's dream.